What would you do if one day you met someone who couldn't hear you? Would you stumble, avoid them, or would you try to listen in a different way? Elena is a shy young woman, working quietly as a waitress in a small diner in Charleston. No one knows she once studied sign language. No one knows why she gave up her dreams and hid behind an apron and polite, practice smiles. Until one afternoon, an older woman, completely deaf, walked into the diner. She didn't order. She didn't speak. But, with just a few simple signs, she left Elena frozen in place. Because those signs were the last connection Elena had to a painful past she thought she'd buried. So if it were you, would you reach out to a stranger when deep down, you're the one who's already broken? This story isn't just about sign language. It's about the choice between running away and facing the truth between silence and love. Are you ready to step into the world of those who live in quiet but carry extraordinary strength? If this story speaks to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to join us on this journey of healing through untold lives. The morning in Charleston was cool yet dull. A trace of last night's rain still clung to the cobblestone streets, leaving behind a strange kind of quiet. Tucked between two rows of red brick buildings stood a tiny diner most people would walk right past without noticing. But for locals, Lula's Diner was a familiar spot, warm, genuine, and filled with the everyday stories of ordinary lives. In the far corner, beside the old coffee station, a young woman carefully polished glasses one by one. Her long brown hair was tied neatly at the back, her large eyes always lowered, never quite meeting the gaze of the customers. Her name was Elena Moore, 27, slender, pale, and so unassuming she could disappear into any crowd without a trace. Elena wasn't the type to leave a strong impression. Yet something about her made people linger. Maybe it was the gentleness in the way she served, or the meticulous little habits like folding napkins into perfect triangles, or pouring coffee without a single spill. Whatever it was, people only knew her as quiet, diligent, and always keeping a careful distance from the world around her. That morning, at exactly 8:15, the glass door rattled softly. Elena looked up, then quickly lowered her eyes. An older woman stepped in, wearing a cream cardigan and a wide-brimmed sun hat. Beside her walked a man in his 30s, white shirt, long black coat, and a silver watch that caught the light with every step. His stride was steady, confident, almost measured. Elena recognized him instantly, impossible to mistake. Gabriel Lawson, the young billionaire Forbes had just named the strategic mind behind Lawson Dynamics. Elena's heart gave a sudden jolt, but she quickly steadied herself. She'd never cared for the ultra-wealthy, but Gabriel was different. A man known for his cold, calculated composure, no scandals, no personal leaks, no gossip. Rumor had it he lived so privately that even the media had given up chasing his personal life. "Mom, you like this corner?" "Right." Gabriel's voice softened as he guided his mother to the window seat. The woman only nodded, resting her hand on her son's. She didn't speak. Elena approached with her small notepad. In her usual, gentle tone, she asked, "Good morning. What can I get you today?" Gabriel glanced at his mother. She quickly scribbled something into a small notebook and pushed it toward him. Elena couldn't help but notice, not out of curiosity, but recognition. The movement of her hands, the faint motion of her lips, subtle, fast, then still. Sign language. Gabriel read aloud scrambled eggs, no salt, toast, lightly crisp, black coffee, just a touch of sugar. Elena smiled, but instead of leaving, her hands slowly lifted. One sign, then another, clear, precise, tender. Her hands began to speak. "Would you like some fresh fruit with that?" The woman looked up at Elena. Her eyes widened, then softened into a smile, surprised, touched, deeply moved. Gabriel turned sharply, his usual distant expression shifting for the first time, real surprise flickering in his eyes. "You know, ASL Elena gave a small nod. I do. My mother was hearing impaired." For a few quiet seconds, time itself seemed to pause. From an invisible waitress, Elena suddenly became the one bridge between Gabriel's mother and the outside world. And in that single moment, everything began to change. Breakfast unfolded slowly. Elena wasn't just serving, she was signing back and forth with Gabriel's mother. They shared little laughs, small observations, the coffee here a bit lighter, the April weather in Charleston so pleasant. Gabriel hardly spoke at all. He simply sat there, watching an older woman and a younger one connecting through gestures he couldn't understand. He said nothing, but his eyes spoke volumes. When it was time to leave, his mother signed something softly. Elena responded, then bowed her head with a smile. Gabriel slipped a business card onto the table. "If you ever think about doing something other than waiting tables, call me." Elena didn't take the card. She only smiled faintly and whispered, "Thank you, but I'm fine here." Yet when they walked out, she quietly picked it up. On the card, Gabriel Lawson, CEO, Lawson Dynamics, and for the first time in years, something stirred inside Hera, feeling both unfamiliar and strangely familiar. That night, after her shift, Elena climbed the creaking wooden stairs to her small room on the second floor of an old apartment building. The place was barely 200 square feet, just enough space for a single bed, a small desk, and a battered bookshelf shed salvaged from a junkyard the year before. In the corner sat a purple orchid, the last gift from her mother before she passed. Elena sat on the bed and pulled out a chipped blue tin box from the drawer. Inside were a faded photo album, a few smudged letters, and a folded medical report. She sat in silence for hours, staring at a picture of herself at 6 years old, her tiny hands signing Mom and ASL, while the woman beside her beamed with a smile so full of joy it hurt to look at. Her mother, Susan Moore, had been deaf, but never weak. She taught art at a special needs elementary school, living her life with quiet resilience. Though she couldn't hear, she taught Elena how to feel sound through vibrations and how to read hearts through eyes. She was the one who gave Elena sign language not as a skill, but as a lifeline to the world. Then, 7 years ago, fate struck. A car accident took her mother away. Elena was only 20, newly accepted on a psychology scholarship at North Carolina State University. Everything collapsed. No one paid the hospital bills. The only insurance her mother had already lapsed. Elena had to quit school, sell everything, and move to Charleston, a city where no one knew her name, to start over from zero. She chose waitressing because it was the one job that didn't demand paperwork or a past, a job where nobody asked questions. Many nights, she still heard her mother's voice in dreams, a voice that had never spoken aloud, yet lived in her memory louder than sound itself. Sometimes, half asleep, Elena would raise her hands into the dark and sign, "I miss you, Mom," but the only answer was silence. Since then, she had lived like a shadow, no friends, no family, no ties, just work, home, survival, not because she didn't want to live differently, because she feared if she opened her heart again, everything would shatter the way it once had. The next morning at Lula's diner, something felt different. Elena noticed glances from customers curious, warmer than usual. A little girl whispered to her mom, "That's the lady who talks with her hands." "Right." The mother smiled and nodded. Elena didn't like attention. Yet this time, it didn't weigh her down. It felt lighter, like a spring breeze brushing her shoulder. For the first time in years, a thought stirred in her. Could something as small as a simple gesture make someone feel connected? Late in the afternoon, just before closing. Lulu handed her a folded note. "Someone left this for you. They said they'll be back." Elena opened it, written neatly in pen. "My mother truly likes you. She'd love to invite you to dinner with us, just the three of us. No reason at all, except she thinks you're special." At the bottom was an address. Not a restaurant. A historic home near South Charleston's Mansion District where every house was worth millions. Her palms dampened with sweat. Refuse or accept. She sat in the kitchen for nearly an hour, torn. The broken part of her screamed, "Don't get involved, don't risk it," but another part, the part her mother had nurtured, whispered back, "Sometimes the one who needs healing most is you." Finally. Elena picked up a pen and wrote her reply, "It'll come." That night, she opened her closet and chose the simplest dress she owned, a navy blue one, with half sleeves and a round neckline. She let her hair fall loose, wore no makeup except a touch of pale pink lipstick. Before stepping out, she turned to the photo of her mother, whispered softly, "Mom, I'm about to do something a little reckless," and from the night breeze drifting through the window, it felt as if a faint, gentle laugh answered her back. Elena stood before the wrought iron gate of the mansion at 1745 Magnolia Drive. Her heart caught in a tangle of emotions she could hardly name. She had never set foot in this part of town, where every house looked like a hotel. Lawns were trimmed with military precision, and soft golden lights glowed across rows of maples like something out of a southern painting. A neatly dressed housekeeper opened the gate with a warm smile, as if she'd known Elena for years. "Miss Elena, isn't it, please? Come in. Mrs. Helen is waiting for you in the garden," crossing the white stone foyer. Elena stepped out into the back garden. There, beneath the soft spill of sunset over the ferns, sat Helen Lawson on a wicker chair. She wore a pale rose silk robe, an ivory scarf draped around her neck, her silver hair pinned neatly in place. Beside her stood Gabriel Lawson silent, still, his gaze resting on his mother with tenderness laced with thought. Elena hesitated, but when Helen turned, smiling, and signed softly, "Thank you for coming," all her hesitation melted away. Elena bowed her head, replying in sign, "It's my honor." Gabriel's brows lifted, his expression curious, almost searching. After a pause, his deep voice broke the quiet. "I didn't realize you were that fluent in ASL." Elena only smiled. Normally, she avoided sharing her past, but this time, she didn't feel the need to hide completely. "I grew up with a deaf mother," she said gently. "Sign language was the first language I ever learned." Gabriel nodded, his sharp edges softening. Helen's face lit up in joy. She didn't need words. For her, simply being understood was enough. That evening carried a warmth Elena hadn't felt in years. Dinner was set on the back veranda, near the grapevine trellis, beneath lanterns strung low, their light soft and golden. The meal wasn't extravagant Southern-style roast chicken, melon salad, garlic toast, but it was thoughtful, comforting, almost homelike. Helen asked question after question about Elena's life, her work, the little things she enjoyed, all of it signed slowly, patiently, with a depth of care. Gabriel, at first reserved, gradually leaned in closer, sometimes translating his mother's words aloud, but Elena always signed her answers directly. When dessert arrived, warm apple pie with melting vanilla ice cream, Gabriel suddenly asked, "What did you study before you became a waitress?" The question stilled Elena. For the first time in years, she felt the old wound stir. "Psychology," she whispered. "I once had a full scholarship." Gabriel tilted his head, his tone steady but curious. "And what made you change paths?" Her eyes met his, steady yet shadowed. "Sometimes life doesn't give us many choices. Sometimes all you can choose is survival." Silence settled, heavy but not uncomfortable. Helen reached across the table, placing her hand gently over Elena's, giving a small squeeze. In her eyes was nothing but unconditional compassion. Gabriel drew in a breath, as though wanting to speak, then thought better of it. Instead, he rose, disappeared into the house, and returned with a small box. Placing it in front of her, he said quietly, "I don't know why, but my mother has grown very fond of you. She asked me to give you this." Inside lay a silk scarf, emerald in color, her name embroidered in silver at the edge. Helen signed, "Not a costly gift, just a sincere thank you." Elena's throat tightened. Her hands trembled as she signed back. "I don't deserve this." Helen smiled, pressing a hand lightly to her chest before signing, "Anyone with a heart that listens deserves." In that instant, Elena felt her own mother's presence through Helen's eyes, through the warmth of the meal, through every gesture that needed no spoken word. When the evening drew to a close, Gabriel walked her back to the gate. For a while, he said nothing. Then, in a low, thoughtful tone, he admitted, "I'm not used to this, but there's something about you I want to understand more." Elena gave a faint smile. "I'm just an ordinary waitress." His eyes, dark and steady, held hers. "No, you're the first person I've ever seen make my mother smile this much." Elena didn't answer, but inside her, something shifted softly, quietly. For the first time in years, she felt a door creak open, not because someone had invited her in, but because she finally had the courage to step forward. A week passed since that unforgettable evening. Elena still worked her usual shifts at Lula's Diner, smiling at customers, wiping glasses, polishing tables as if nothing had changed. Yet something inside her had shifted, quietly but firmly, like the world had revealed a new path she never knew was there. On Tuesday morning, at exactly 8:00, a deep blue Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up in front of the diner. The door opened, and a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, hair neatly combed, stepped inside with a refined air. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I'm looking for Miss Elena Moore." Every head in the diner turned. Elena, balancing a tray of coffee, froze. The man approached and handed her a gold-trimmed invitation, her name embossed in raised lettering. "On behalf of Mr. Gabriel Lawson, you're cordially invited to the opening of the Helen Lawson Art Gallery at the Charleston Museum this Saturday evening." For a moment, Elena stood stunned. Her first instinct was to refuse, to say, "I don't belong in that world." But then Helen's warm, unjudging eyes flickered in her memory. She accepted, not for status or glamour, but because she knew something waited for her on the other side of that door. That evening, back in her tiny apartment, Elena stood before the mirror. She wore a simple black dress, elegant, modest, carefully mended from a thrift store find. Her hair flowed naturally, her makeup barely there, save for a hint of soft pink lipstick. Around her neck, the only thing that gleamed was the emerald silk scarf embroidered with her name, Helen's Gift, a quiet reminder: you deserve to be where you are invited. The gallery shimmered with light, filled with Charleston's elite and the buzz of reporters. But when Elena walked in, time seemed to slow. At the far end of the room, beneath a large oil portrait of Helen as a young woman, stood Gabriel Lawson. When his eyes met hers, surprise flickered, then softened into a genuine smile. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said as he stepped toward her. "I wasn't sure either," Elena replied softly, her gaze brushing the scarf, "until I saw my name written by someone who truly meant it." Gabriel's expression shifted, something unspoken in his eyes before he offered his arm. Together, they walked through the gallery. The exhibition told Helen Lawson's story, not the public one, but the private truth. Through paintings and photographs, it revealed her journey, a deaf girl isolated during wartime. Later, a resilient mother raising her son alone after losing her husband in a mining accident. Each piece carried a caption, short lines in sign language etched in bronze beneath the frames. Elena stopped before one painting, a middle-aged woman standing in a dim kitchen. Sunlight cutting across her worn but radiant face. Beneath it, the words in sign: "Silence does not mean weakness." A shiver ran through Elena. Memories surged her own mother, Susan Moore, standing in their narrow kitchen, teaching her signs while stirring a pot with one hand, her eyes glowing with pride each time Elena learned a new gesture. Gabriel watched her quietly. "My mother used to say only those who've known the loneliness of silence can truly hear another person's heart." Elena gave a sad smile. "That's something my mother used to say, too." Gabriel's brows drew together. "Your mother was," Elena nodded gently. "She was deaf. She passed when I was 19. A car accident, on her way home from work." The mood fell quiet, heavy with shared grief. Gabriel guided her toward a quieter corner, away from the crowd. From his pocket, he pulled out an old photograph, slightly worn at the edges, and held it out to her. In the picture was a young woman about Elena's age, wearing a psychology student's uniform, seated among a group of deaf children, signing patiently to a little boy. "This was in an old file I came across from a deaf support center in Georgia," Gabriel said softly. "That's you. Isn't it?" Elena's breath caught. It was her in her sophomore year college, back when she volunteered every weekend. How did you get this?" Gabriel's voice lowered, almost careful. "I needed to understand why my mother felt such a connection with you, so I looked. And now I think I do." Elena couldn't speak. For years, she had buried her past, terrified of being seen. But now, someone had uncovered it, not to judge her, but to understand. And in that moment, she realized sometimes the truth, when seen by the right eyes, wasn't a weight to carry. It was a bridge. 3 days after the exhibition, Elena's phone buzzed with a short message from Gabriel tomorrow night. "I'm cooking. If you're free, I'd like to invite you to dinner. No address, no fancy promises, no sign of some high-profile event, just an honest invitation." Elena read the message 3 times. Half of her wanted to say no, too awkward, too unfamiliar. The other half felt a strange warmth, something nameless but quietly pulling her forward. That Thursday evening, she entered the Magnolia Drive estate lot through the grand front gate, but the side entrance near the jasmine bushes, their fragrance just as heavy as the day she'd first met Helen. The door opened to reveal Gabriel wearing an apron, holding a wooden spoon, a streak of flour across his cheek. Elena laughed, genuine, unguarded. For the first time, he didn't look like a billionaire strategist. He looked like an ordinary man, a little clumsy, almost endearing. "I'm guessing tonight won't be getting any Michelin stars," Gabriel joked, serving up homemade pasta and salad. "As long as you don't mix up the sugar with the salt, he'll survive," Elena teased. Dinner was warm, unpretentious, more real than anything either of them had shared before. They traded small stories. No one else knew how Gabriel once bombed his Yale interview by stumbling over the dean's name, how Elena fainted her first day waitressing from sheer nerves. These weren't headlines or boardroom stories. They were the kind of confessions people only give when walls finally start to fall. After the dishes were cleared, they sat on the back balcony. An old, upright piano stood near the window. Gabriel glanced at it, hesitating. "My mother used to teach me to feel music," he said quietly. "Not through sound, but by placing my hand against the wood. Would you like to try?" Elena nodded. Gabriel began to play a soft, classical piece. Elena closed her eyes, resting her palm against the wooden body of the piano. Vibrations rose and fell beneath her skin, steady like a heartbeat, rushing, then retreating like waves. They said nothing, but the silence was deeper than words. When the music stopped, Elena whispered, "Do you ever feel like you live between two worlds? One loud, full of talking and noise, and another, silent but more real?" Gabriel's eyes lingered on her. He nodded slowly. "I've lived in the noise too long. Sometimes I forget I even have a heart." They looked at each other. In that moment, under the golden glow of the lamps, with night air heavy with jasmine, Elena felt, for the first time, that she wasn't standing outside life looking in. She belonged. But just as the air softened into something unspoken, a sudden sound shattered the calm. A sleek black car screeched to a stop outside the gate. From it stepped a platinum-haired woman in sharp heels, her presence cutting through the night like glass. Gabriel stood at once, his face tightening. "Mother, what are you doing here?" Elena froze. The woman was none other than Clara Bennett, Gabriel's stepmother, the second wife of his grandfather. She controlled 30% of Lawson Enterprises. Powerful, ruthless, feared. Clara strode forward without invitation, her gaze sweeping over Elena as if she were a blemish on white silk. "Gabriel, your brother is delivering the keynote at the year's biggest investment summit. And you're here playing piano with who?" Exactly. Elena's hands clenched, her body stiffening. Gabriel's voice cut steady and low. "This is Elena Moore, my mother's guest of honor at the gallery, and someone I value." Clara's eyes narrowed to slits. "You know the rules. Outsiders are not allowed near the executive circle. The family charter is clear. No one without counsel vetting has access to internal leadership. You're playing with fire, Gabriel?" Elena's chest tightened. She had never imagined one quiet dinner could brand her a risk. But before she could speak, a half-buried memory surfaced, her mother's old employee badge, stamped with the faded Lawson Enterprises logo. Elena stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Excuse me, you joined Lawson in the 1980s, didn't you?" Clara blinked. I became a major shareholder at 27. Why, Elena reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph, the same one Gabriel had shown her at the gallery. It was her mother, signing to a small boy in a support center. Elena pointed at the boy. I believe that child was Gabriel. The room seemed to freeze. Clara snatched the photo, her face paling. This was from sealed archives. How did you even Elena met her eyes squarely? Because my mother, Susan Moore, was the one who taught Gabriel his very first signs. Gabriel staggered a step back, his gaze caught between past and present, shock rippling across his face. Clara's jaw tightened. Without another word, she turned on her heel and left, her heels cracking against the gravel until her car disappeared into the night. Silence hung heavy in her wake. Gabriel stood still for a long moment before turning back, his voice low, almost reverent. "You're the missing piece," he whispered, "the one my mother always said I'd find but never did." Elena left that dinner with her chest tight, as if someone had reached in and squeezed her heart. She hadn't expected the woman who appeared that night to be Clara Bennett Knott, just Gabriel's former partner, but the very person tied to the deepest wound of her life. Years ago, Clara had worked alongside Elena's mother at the elementary school. It was Clara who orchestrated the false financial scandal that forced Susan Moore out. There had never been proof, but Clara was the favored teacher, protected by donors and connections, while Elena's mother was branded the flawed, untrustworthy one. That disgrace broke her spirit, leading to depression and eventually the tragic car accident. Elena had never confronted Clara. It had all happened too fast, too mercilessly. She'd only been a teenager then, helpless, watching her mother fade, dishonored by a world that turned its back on the vulnerable. Now, Clara stood before her in a glittering evening gown, glass of red wine in hand, her gaze sharp and haughty. For Elena, the sight ripped her back to age 19, trembling at her mother's hospital bedside, hearing nothing but silence, no final words. Gabriel noticed the change in her face. He followed her outside, finding her standing beneath the garden lights, shadows stretching long across the old stone path. "What's wrong?" His voice was low, lined with concern. Elena stayed silent. She wanted to scream that she couldn't share air with the woman who had destroyed her mother's life, but she didn't know if Gabriel even knew. She clenched her fists. "Just old memories. I need time," she whispered, holding herself steady. Gabriel didn't press, but his eyes lingered on her, conflicted. For the first time, Elena saw uncertainty in him, helplessness even. He wasn't a man who wore emotions easily, yet in that moment he seemed lost in her retreat. The next day, Elena took leave from work. She went to the cemetery, to the quiet stone that marked her mother's rest. Susan Moore, mother, teacher, friend, kneeling. She pressed her palm to the cool ground and whispered, "Mom, I saw her again. I don't know what to do. I'm still not strong enough. Am I?" The wind stirred. Maple leaves drifted down, brushing her shoulders like a ghost's hand. Elena closed her eyes, breathing deep, and touched the silver pendant around her neck, the leaf-shaped charm her mother had given her. In that silence, she made her choice. She would return to Lulu's diner the next day. That evening, Gabriel came to find her. He didn't enter the diner, just stood outside beneath the streetlight, his face etched in shadow, looking strangely alone. "I need to talk," he said when she stepped out. They sat on a stone bench in the small park behind the diner. the same place Elena once sat with Helen under golden dusk. Gabriel explained that Clara's arrival had been uninvited. He and Clara had ended things 2 years ago, though she often lingered, wielding her connections and finance as leverage. "Did you know about what she did to my mother?" Elena asked, her voice calm but cold. Gabriel shook his head. "No, but he'll find out. If it's true, I'm sorry you had to face her like that. Sorry you had to relive it." Elena studied him. For the first time, she saw pure sincerity in his guarded eyes. It unsettled her. She didn't want to forgive so easily, but she also refused to let anger define her. "Everyone has a past," she said softly. "Not everyone gets the chance to make it right." Before he could reply, she rose and walked away, leaving him in silence. That night, Elena lay awake, torn between fury, grief, and the faintest thread of hope. Maybe it was time to stop running, to stop hiding in her pain. The next day, Helen appeared at Lulu's diner alone. She carried a hand-knitted scarf, placing it gently in Elena's hands. With her soft, deliberate signs, she said, "Thank you for not turning away from us. You've changed my son." Elena nearly broke down. She'd never thought of herself as having influence, much less over someone like Gabriel, yet maybe, in the quiet of sign language and its wordless honesty, people understood each other more deeply than words ever could. That Thursday morning, Lula's diner buzzed with its usual chorus of clinking cups and murmurs. The air smelled of waffles and coffee, the kind of scent that felt like a mother's embrace on a winter morning. Elena walked in with a strange calm, not quite peace, but no longer the storm of yesterday either. Something inside her had shifted like dry earth quietly drinking after a gentle rain. At the window table sat Helen, as always. A small vase of lavender stood in front of her, and she was writing steadily in a leather notebook, her movements precise and graceful. When she looked up and saw Elena, her face lit with a soft smile. Her hands moved. "Did you sleep well?" Elena smiled back, answering with her hands, "I'm learning how to sleep better." They conversed without sound through eyes, through gestures, through the kind of language that carries more weight than words. Other patrons began to notice. Some elderly guests smiled knowingly, while younger ones stared wide-eyed, seeing perhaps for the first time how silence could sing. But for Elena, these gestures weren't exotic. They were the pulse of memory. Her mother's voice made visible, the invisible thread tying past to present. After a while, Helen slid an envelope across the table. Inside was an invitation to a charity concert raising funds for deaf children in Charleston. Helen was the patron. The organizers needed a sign language interpreter for their guest artist. Elena's breath caught when she saw the name Ava Kim, the world-renowned violinist who had lost her hearing at 12, a prodigy who didn't hear music but felt it through vibration, through emotion, through sheer will. "I've seen her in videos," Elena whispered. "I never thought I'd get to meet her." Helen's eyes softened. Her hands moved again. "I believe in connection. Those who've walked through darkness will always recognize the light in each other." Just then, Gabriel entered the diner. He wasn't dressed in his usual armor of tailored suits, just a crisp white shirt, gray slacks, and a paper bag in his hand. Seeing his mother smile at Elena, the hard edges in his face softened. He walked over, set the bag on the table, and said, "Apple pie. From the bakery you like. Yesterday you didn't seem yourself." Elena looked at him, surprised, but only nodded in thanks. There was something different about him today, less guarded, less distant, as though he was finally trying not to command, but to reach. Helen observed them both with quiet amusement. Then she scribbled a note in her looping script and slid it to Elena. My son isn't good at saying feelings, but if he acts, it's real. Elena read it, and her chest loosened. She glanced at Gabriel. This time, his gaze didn't look like a businessman's, calculated and cool, but something far rarer, unshielded sincerity. That afternoon, Elena accepted the role, not just for Helen, but for herself. After years of silence, she would step onto a stage again, not to perform, but to connect. The concert hall that evening shimmered with light and expectation. When the first notes of Clair de Lune began, the audience fell into reverent hush. Ava Kim walked on stage, her black hair tied back, a white gown flowing around her. She lifted her violin, closed her eyes, and then sound blossomed. Notes like moonlight, flowing into every corner of the hall. Elena stood to the side, her hands alive, shaping every phrase, every emotion. She wasn't just translating, she was echoing, transmitting feeling. And the audience didn't just hear the music, they saw it. They felt it through the movement of two women, one who played without hearing, one who spoke without words. When the piece ended, silence hung thick with awe before the hall erupted in applause. People wept, strangers embraced Ava, and then a small deaf child approached Elena, tugged her hand, and signed shyly, "I want to be like you." Tears blurred Elena's vision as she dropped to her knees and hugged the child. From the back of the hall, Gabriel and Helen watched in silence. For the first time, Gabriel understood. This wasn't just a waitress his mother had brought home. Elena was something rarer. She was light, the kind that arrives quietly, just when it's needed most. A week after the benefit concert, Lulu's Diner had become something of a local landmark. People came not just for the pancakes or coffee anymore, but to catch a glimpse of the waitress who spoke with her hands like she was dancing. Others showed up after hearing the story of a deaf violinist who played like an angel, with an interpreter who moved the whole room to tears. But for Elena, life stayed the same. She poured coffee, jotted orders, wiped down tables, and smiled. The only difference was a subtle glow in her eyes, like the faint light of dawn finally breaking through. Gabriel stopped by the diner more often now. He didn't crowd her, didn't push, just sat by the window with his usual order, apple tart and black tea. He watched her quietly, with a kind of respect that gave her space to breathe. Helen, as always, left little folded napkins with bits of poetry written in sign, just for Elena. Life was warming slowly, like a cup of hot cocoa on a winter morning, until the doorbell chimed and the whole diner seemed to freeze. Clara. Elena turned, her chest tightening. She would never mistake that ash-blonde hair, those amber eyes, that elegant but hollow strut. Even after 5 years, Claire, the woman who betrayed her, who helped destroy her mother's career, stood there, smug and unshaken, like a wound ripped open again. Well, Elena Moore, is that really you? Still waiting tables? I see. Clara's smirk cut like glass. Elena's grip tightened around the tray, but her voice was steady. Other diners were watching. Hello? Clara? You want to order something? Clara slid into a booth, crossing her legs like she owned the place. I'm here for business. I need your help getting to Gabriel Lawson. I know you're close with his mother. I'm spearheading a real estate project in Charleston, and I need a big investor." Elena just stared at her. Memories crashed back the day her mother was fired over fabricated charges of financial misconduct. Clara had framed her to cover her own mistakes. That one lie had cost Elena her scholarship, her future, her sense of belonging. And now Clara wanted her help. "You're in the wrong place," Elena said, turning to walk away. But Clara's voice followed, sharp and cruel. "Don't think I don't see what you're doing using Gabriel's mother to climb your way up. You'll always be the daughter of a disgraced school aide." "Elena, history doesn't vanish." The words hit like a slap. Elena froze. Her shoulders trembled, not with fear, but with anger. Still, she breathed deep, anchoring herself. She was no longer the 18-year-old who collapsed under Clara's poison. That afternoon, Elena went to Helen's home, not to complain, but to seek wisdom. Helen listened in silence as Elena's hands told the story. When she was done, Helen simply reached across the table, squeezed her hand, and wrote, "The past is the one thing we can't rewrite, but the present is our only chance to do what's right." Then another line, "If you don't face it, it will keep returning. But if you look it in the eye, you'll see it's smaller than you think." Elena nodded, her chest easing. That evening, Gabriel showed up at the diner. He wasn't empty-handed. He carried a small stack of sign language books and a pastel box of macarons. He held them out, awkward, almost boyish. "I thought you'd like these. Books and sweets, for the first time in days." Elena smiled an honest, unguarded smile. She sat beside him. "Gabriel, I need to tell you something about Clara." She told him everything, about the past, about her mother, about Clara's lies, and about the encounter that morning. Gabriel listened without interruption, his face unreadable but intent. When she finished, he simply said, "Thank you for trusting me with this." Then he typed a few words on his phone. The next morning, an official email went out from Lawson Enterprises declining all cooperation with Clara's company due to unresolved ethical concerns. No mention of Elena, no dramatics, just truth, set free like sunlight, breaking without anyone needing to command it. The following day, Clara stormed back into Lulu's, stripped of her arrogance. "They rejected my deal. Was this you?" Elena looked her straight in the eye. "I only told the truth. The decision was theirs." Clara faltered. Elena continued, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not the girl you once knew. I don't live for revenge. But I also won't stay silent when the truth needs to be spoken." For once, Clara had nothing to say. She left the diner defeated, and Elena didn't stand there as the winner, but as someone who had finally stepped beyond the shadows of her past. Autumn drifted into Charleston like a quiet hymn. Golden oak leaves carpeted the sidewalks, the kind that crunch softly underfoot, the kind that remind you that seasons always change, even when your heart refuses to. The air was crisp, clean, gentle, but inside Elena, a storm gathered. She couldn't name it yet, but her instincts whispered something was coming. Since her last confrontation with Clara, Lula's diner had grown different. Crowds filled the booths, but not everyone was there for the waffles or the coffee. Some customers snapped photos from their phones, pretending to text. Others asked too many questions about the waitress who speaks with her hands. Elena smiled politely, but inside, unease spread like cracks in glass. That night, when she came home, a plain envelope lay at her doorstep. No name, no return address. She opened it carefully. Inside, only a single message scrawled in sharp ink. "Who do you think you are to deny me? This isn't over. No signature. None needed." Elena knew the handwriting, the venom, the arrogance. Clara. The very next morning, another presence entered her life, smooth, polished, dangerous in a different way. Alex Donovan. He walked into Lulu's with the swagger of someone who thought the world owed him attention. Designer watch, perfect smile, a journalist's notebook tucked under his arm. He introduced himself loudly enough for half the diner to hear. Him writing a feature, he announced. Teeth gleaming. The miracle story of the young woman who changed a billionaire's deaf mother's life. Elena Moore. America deserves to know her. At that very moment, Gabriel sat in his usual corner seat. His teacup paused mid-air. His eyes narrowed instantly. He rose, approached, and shook Alex's hand with the politeness of a man who didn't like what he was touching. "The article will be front-page material," Alex continued, grinning. "We could make Elena famous across the country. She deserves it." Elena's hands tightened around the tray she was carrying. Something about him felt wrong, like a salesman who believed he'd already closed the deal. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I don't want to be famous. I just want a quiet life." Alex tilted his head, eyes gleaming with challenge. "Sometimes," he said, "special people don't get to stay quiet." And Elena knew then this was no harmless journalist. He wanted a story, whether she gave it to him or not. Her fear was confirmed days later. A shaky video surfaced online, Elena and Helen signing to one another at a corner table, sunlight spilling over their hands. The audio was muffled, but the tenderness in Helen's smile, the way Elena touched her hand, said everything words could not. By morning, Elena Moore was everywhere, shared across Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Blogs called her the Angel of Lulu's. Talk shows sent invitations. Strangers crowded the diner, not for breakfast but for her. Helen called her, voice trembling through years of silence. For the first time, Helen spoke aloud, not wrong, but careful. The words, fragile and broken, struck Elena harder than any headline. She sat before her mirror that night, staring at her reflection. For the first time, the world saw her. A part of her was touched, warmed by the idea that her mother's memory, her quiet battles, had led to this moment. But another part of her recoiled. She didn't want pity. She didn't want to be a spectacle. She didn't want to be a story. Later, in Helen's house, Gabriel waited for her. He had already seen the clip. He didn't scold. He didn't question. He only looked at her with steady eyes and said, "I can make it disappear, but I won't decide for you. It has to be your choice." Her chest ached. She whispered, "Aren't you afraid? If I tell the truth about Clara, about my mother, about everything, aren't you afraid of what it will bring?" Gabriel shook his head, slow, certain. "I'm not afraid of truth. I'm only afraid of watching you carry a weight you're not ready for." And, for the first time in years, Elena broke. Tears spilled, not from weakness, but from the sheer relief of someone finally standing behind her, not demanding her strength, just offering his. The next day, Elena made her choice. She accepted an online interview, but not for a fairy tale feature. She refused to be polished into a token or pitied into a headline. Instead, she sat before the camera in a simple white blouse, her hair tied back, her voice steady. "Sign language is not magic," she said. It's just a bridge, but a bridge only works if both sides are willing to step onto it. I'm not special. The people who are special are those who choose to be silent and to listen. When the broadcast ended, the comments poured in. Some were tears of gratitude, some were attacks, calling her an opportunist. Gabriel read them all and showed her. Elena only smiled, light as a feather. "It's all right," she said. At least they stopped long enough to hear. That night, Helen handed her a folded note. Her handwriting was elegant, steady. "You are no longer a leaf hiding in the shadows. You are the wind." And for the first time, Elena believed it. It was a winter afternoon in Charleston. The last rays of sunlight streamed through Lulu's diner, casting golden lines across the old wooden floor. Inside, life went on as always, the clink of coffee cups, the soft hum of conversations, the comfort and smell of sugar and cinnamon in the air. Elena sat at the table by the window, the seat she usually saved for Helen each week. But today, the chair was empty. Helen was in New York, attending her very first conference on hearing-assistive technology. Before she left, she had signed to Elena, "Freedom isn't about how far you travel. It's about daring to believe you can." Elena folded her hands in her lap, staring out at the quiet street. A year had passed since her story spread across the internet. Some things had changed. Others stayed the same. She was no longer the invisible waitress hiding in the corner of the diner. Now she ran a small foundation called Silent Bridges, offering free sign language lessons to families of the deaf and training programs in nonverbal empathy for service workers. She wasn't famous, but people who needed her could find her, and that was enough. As for Clara Hensley, he never came back. After Gabriel refused her business deal, and after the court ordered her to repay part of a fraudulent grant, Clara slipped away from the headlines. The public forgot her as quickly as they once praised her. And Gabriel. He was still there, not loud, not demanding, not claiming titles. He never asked to be called boyfriend, never pressed for labels, but Elena knew, like the oak tree at the end of the street, he would always be there. Steady, rooted, waiting. One afternoon, after class ended at Silent Bridges, a little girl no older than 7 tugged at Elena's sleeve. She spoke with her voice, but also with her hands, hesitant but clear. "Are you the lady who helped my friend's mom hear with her hands?" Elena laughed softly. "No, sweetheart. I just showed her that sometimes. Listening doesn't need ears." The girl frowned in concentration, then signed slowly. "I want to grow up like you." Elena froze. It wasn't a compliment, it was a mirror, a reflection of something she never thought she could be. Once, she had only wanted to disappear. Now, she'd become the hope someone else wanted to follow. Days later, Helen returned from New York with a gift. A framed black and white photo from the conference, Helen signing the word "Hope" to a little boy with dark skin and bright eyes. Underneath, a simple caption read, "Every hand is a doorway." Elena hung the frame in the diner, just above Helen's usual chair. She stood there for a long time, letting the silent language of the picture echo inside her like a song without sound. That night, after closing the diner, Gabriel asked her to walk with him. They moved slowly under the street lamps, each step stitching past and present together. He said quietly, "I used to think my mother was the strongest person I'd ever meet, but now I know there's someone else." Elena didn't look at him. She only whispered, "I'm not strong. I've just stopped being afraid of silence." Gabriel stopped, and answered, "That's strong enough." They ended up on a small bridge overlooking the dark river. Elena leaned on the railing, watching the water drift through the city. "Years ago," she said, "I used to wish for someone who could hear me without me shouting. But now I realize it's when we truly listen to others that we finally hear ourselves." Gabriel reached for her hand and held it. No more words were needed. And so, the story didn't end with a wedding, or a grand victory, or fireworks. It ended the way spring always comes after a long winter, quietly, gently, with a single ray of light finding its way into the darkest corner of the soul. Sometimes, all it takes is an empty chair by the window, a glance that understands, and a heart willing to listen. There are pains that never speak out loud, yet they linger in every glance, every quiet choice someone makes. Elena's story is not only about her own healing, it's a gentle reminder that every person we meet is fighting a battle we cannot see. In this story, sign language is more than just a way to communicate with the deaf. It becomes a symbol of listening with the heart. Because when we choose to hear others not just with our ears, but with true empathy, we open doors to connections deeper than words could ever reach. For older viewers, Elena's journey is also a soft reminder it is never too late to forgive, to love, to open your heart again. What has been lost in the past may never return, but the choices we make today can soothe those wounds, for ourselves and for others. And if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever stayed silent in a crowded room or carried regret for words left unsaid, know this: you are not alone. May Elena's story give you the courage to speak, to live, and to love in the most authentic way possible. Thank you for walking with us through this emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so together we can keep spreading more stories that heal. See you in the next one.